Yes, welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien Senior. I'm the guy behind all the NRL Physio content you see on social media. My co-host, James, mate, you're here. I mean, it's been a few days now. We've been able to mourn really, the girls. Like, that's what I'll say. Yeah, like up the girls for winning the Origin against all odds. But, I mean, in the boys, the men's Origin, look, it's just another story of the rank underdog unable to overcome the heavy favourites. Just couldn't do it, could they? And it was a bit of a sad Wednesday night for us.
Yeah, look, it was pretty embarrassing, Brian, wasn't it? I think the first half was you're just praying that the tide was gonna change, but no such luck there, and probably a little bit of alarm bells for me, to be honest, Brian. We weren't red hot game 1, and that game 2 was utter dog shit. So, what that means for us in game 3 is a little bit concerning. So, bit to worry about moving forward. Few, I guess, selection things are gonna come up. Billy's gonna be under the blowtorch there, but we trust as usual. I think shout out to the girls, O'Brien. When you look at that series, they were only ahead for the last 2 minutes of game 2, and then they came out in game 3 and absolutely pumped New South Wales and gave them an absolute pasting. So that was really good to see. Good game of footy, wet game in Townsville. How good. I was all about it.
Yeah, mate. It was I had a couple of girls here who were very excited to wake up the next morning and watch the highlights, which is good. They didn't care too much for the men's on Thursday morning, but certainly keen to get up and watch the girls on Friday morning, which was good. But I totally agree with you. I just hope that Billy and Dave Fafita have smoked the peace pipe or whatever. Dave started sending Christmas presents to Billy's house or something like that, so that we can get a Dave Fafita appearance in Origin 3. That would be very, very good. All right, guys, let's get straight into it. As always, we're on YouTube now. Subscribe, review, thumbs up, all those things. You know what they are. You know why you're here. We're going to run through the injuries. We're going to relate it back to SuperCoach Fantasy. We're going to talk about re-injury risk. We're going to talk about on-field performance. If you like this content, patreon.com/NRL Physio. Head on over there. Heaps of fun stuff there. But otherwise, let's get into the injuries from Origin 2 and round 17.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I mean, I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Rightio, round 17, Brian, and State of Origin 2. We're going to start with Origin. So we're going to look at the backlash from that, or the injuries out of that. The first one from Queensland was Hamiso Tabuai Fidow. He's been diagnosed with an AC joint injury. Zac Lomax from the Blues we've got sort of a couple issues here with AC joint and a knee bursitis concern. Mitch Moses with the foot, and then Reece Walsh with potentially a hip or back concern, hip pointer, or something in that realm, contact injury. Do you want to start with Hamiso Tabuai Fidow, Brian? I guess you're a Finns fan, so seeing him appear for the second half, were you a little bit apprehensive seeing him get out on the field with the AC taped up and probably painkiller at halftime?
Mate, I'll try and remove my Finns fandom from it as much as I can and say, and you or I, and you're actually the one who brought up the point, I think, so I can post a screenshot of our chat somewhere if somebody needs proof. But yeah, we were both really surprised to see him back out there. Like, obviously, to quote the great Billy Slater, we're still Queenslanders. So, the toughness and playing through pain, all that kind of stuff, you get it. But yeah, at 34-0, to have a guy go back out there, thankfully it's come back as a grade 1 AC, which is really good. But yeah, if he goes back out there and damages it further, look, you're not risking a whole lot with an AC. Might be the difference between 1 to 2 weeks or 4 to 5 weeks, but that's Origin 3 gone. For the Finns, that's a significant chunk of the remainder of the season gone as well. So yeah, it wasn't the best sight seeing him go back out there. As I said, spoiler alert, thankfully, minor AC joint sprain from the scans. So he would have been right for the Finns this weekend coming if they didn't have a bye. So all's well that ends well. You can sit here in hindsight and say it was a great call to put him back out there. But yeah, I think very lucky to not do further damage there. I think I've had a few people asking, like, are we looking at like painkilling injections and those kind of things? Pretty much every time with AC joint injuries, they're mostly pain management issues. There's not risk for, as I said, major further damage. So he'll have, whether it be painkilling injections or just oral pain medication to try and get that pain down, he'll go back out with like a guard strap, they usually make like a thermoplastic kind of guard that sits over the AC joint. They'll strap that on there. They'll pad it up really heavily, just try and protect it as much as possible. But he's just a risk of in-game aggravation moving forward. So for Origin 3, I think there's that, there's that risk that he cops another blow to that shoulder, and then he's in trouble again. That's what they've got to consider. Zac Lomax, like all the talk was the knee bursitis, I think, and that was a big thing. He had to have like fluid drain from it. He developed a hematoma, which is just, a really bad bruise. The knee bursitis itself didn't really bother me too much. Anybody who was asking in Patreon, I was saying, look, this is a minor issue. It's something that he has to continue to deal with, but they drain the fluid away and away he goes. He then got ruled out, but it was actually for his AC joint injury. So his shoulder. So I've somewhere on the depths of my computer, I've got a recording of him scoring or attempting to score a try, I think it was, a couple of weeks back, and he landed pretty heavily. It might have even been backing up after that first Origin game, and he came down on his shoulder pretty heavily. I was surprised that he was able to stay on at the time. So he's obviously playing through, once again, like a minor AC joint issue there. So he's another one who's just a risk of aggravating that moving forward. But the best thing for it is rest. So the fact he had this week off and they got a good win against the Finns. So, all's well that ends well for the Dragons. Great call there as well. Mitch Moses with the foot. I just wanted to mention that because a couple of kicks, like big bombs and stuff, where his kicking game was immense in the game. But a couple of kicks, particularly late in the game, he was clutching at his foot. And he's obviously come out for the Eels on the weekend now and absolutely tore it up. But don't love, lingering foot soreness with a guy coming back from a fifth metatarsal fracture, which is an injury that has an up to 20% refracture rate. So, yeah, obviously, like the Eels aren't going to send him out there this weekend if there's, any issues. But I think the biggest thing there is that often these fractures build up over time. It's a build up of pressure and then it goes. So, yeah, just one to watch with Mitch Moses. I'm a little bit nervous there. And then Reece Walsh with the hip/back. Just worth mentioning, he got dumped pretty heavily at the end of the game. It was last 2 or 3 minutes and needed the trainer come out and check on him. So, look, whether there's a hip/, some sort of back cork or bruise or something like that. And we'll talk about the resting of him later. But yeah, James, I think you kind of were on the same page as me with Hammer in terms of sending him out there after halftime.
Yeah, I was. I think when you're down 38 or 34-0, sending him back on there was just not what needed to happen. I think Queensland just had to say, well, look, we've been comprehensively outplayed in game 2. We'll look forward to game 3. Sending one of your best players out there in a very key position that we don't have a lot of depth in, I thought that was playing with fire. I didn't really rate that decision very highly. Thankfully, it's all worked out, but I think that wasn't really great decision-making in a game that wasn't must-win for us. So I think we were lucky to get away with that one, to be perfectly honest with you, Brien. That was my take on things. We'll talk about the HIAs from round 17 now. So the names we've got on the list this evening are Phoenix Crossland, Jordan Martin, Adam Mariota, and Jordan Rapana. So the HIAs we want to speak to there with those entering the protocol, Brien, was there anyone more specifically you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I think Phoenix Crossland's an interesting one. He was technically in the last 15 minutes. I think it was about 13 minutes to go. But there was that much action in that game. What an absolute rip snorter of a game that Knights Eels game was. But there was enough action that 15 minutes passed. So on the official interchange logs, it did have him down as like can't return. So in other words, failed. Potentially failed. And see, this is the hard thing. So he copped a blow to the head. But it also had that kind of like flexion, lateral flexion to the side, so ear to shoulder kind of movement as well. And he's kind of feeling at his shoulder a little bit. So that's that burner/stinger kind of movement. So was it that he couldn't come back on because he failed a HIA? If so, he's more than likely going to miss next week. If it's just a shoulder and he couldn't come back on because of the burner, then, who knows? And to answer people's questions, sometimes on the official interchange logs, it says like cannot return or not cleared to return, but it's like for another injury in there. We've had that happen before in the past. So this is a bit of a grey area, as so much with the HIA is. And then just worth mentioning, I think with Mariota and Rapana, they are in the last 15 as well. So we haven't got confirmation on them, but they both didn't look great. So I've just included them there.
Rightio. Bulldogs versus Sharks was the first game in the round there, Brian, on the Friday night, so nothing to talk about there. Warriors v Broncos, 2 on the casualty ward here with the Broncos. So Jack Gosiewski was a broken arm, and then Fletcher Baker with an MCL sprain. It looks like moderate grade there. Both going to be facing a decent amount of time on the sidelines. They're going to test the depth for the Broncos there, aren't they?
Yeah, Gosiewski, I think 8 weeks, the Broncos have said, which is pretty standard for those forearm bones, especially like mid-shaft, which is kind of what it looked like, sort of halfway up the forearm there. And then Fletcher Baker, he's getting scans, but they think moderate grade MCL sprain, which would be like around that 4 to 6 weeks. So, yeah, mate, it doesn't get any easier for the depth in the Bronx. Marty Tabuai, mate, I was watching Marty Tabuai run around on the weekend, and I just totally forgot that he was still playing NRL. That was, there was some boys. The Broncos are certainly getting to the bottom of their top 30, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, it's not looking fantastic for our top 8 prospects. That is for sure, Ryan. It's going to be tight getting in there. The Knights versus Eels, what a barnstorm of a game this was, as you mentioned earlier. But for the Knights, pre-game, Dylan Lucas was a hamstring rule out, and Leo Thompson was an Achilles rule out. Maika Sivo was a hamstring injury, which is a hamstring re-injury for Maika Sivo, isn't it?
Yeah, so there wasn't any confirmation, I think, that he'd actually strained it. You could argue potentially it was just cramping because he kind of just clutched at it. He didn't look great for the last 10 minutes or so, but he stayed out there. I know it was a close game, but I just, I don't know whether they'd leave him out there if he'd redone his hamstring, leave him out there to do more damage. Like that's an injury, unlike the AC joint earlier with Hammer, where if you tear that further, like that's big trouble. And you don't want more scar tissue in a hamstring than you need to because it has future implications and big problems. So yeah, I had a few questions about this, like re-injury. Does it add to recovery time? It absolutely does. Like a re-injury of any injury, it doesn't have to be just hamstrings, any kind of injury. If you re-injure it, and say you re-injured it, the picture perfect same amount of damage. So it's a grade 1 in the middle of the hamstring belly, muscle belly, and then it's the same again, grade 1, same number of fibers. Your recovery is going to be longer for the second one, purely because you obviously didn't have the capabilities to avoid injury after the first one. So you're going to have to take better care of it coming out of the second one. You've got scar tissue on top of scar tissue, neural changes, all those kind of things. And we'll talk about that with Xavier Coates in a second. In terms of how long would Sivo miss if it is a re-injury, I think it's going to be minor, if anything, because he stayed out there. So usually that'd be a 2 to 4 week return to play. In minor cases, it only usually adds about a week on. So I'd be expecting somewhere a return in that 3 to 5 week range. That's if there is a strain. I do want to say that that's not guaranteed at the moment, but I think either way, I'd be hoping it's on the lesser end purely because he was able to stay out there for 10 minutes and not have too many issues. Then, yeah, Dylan Lucas and Leo Thompson, they're something. Hamstring with Lucas was only tightness, apparently, and then Leo Thompson's just been dealing with an ongoing Achilles injury, a bit like a Sean Johnson earlier this year. So it's just something he's going to have to manage. It's something he's going to have to manage for the rest of the season. He might need a game or two off here to manage that training load and that running load as much as possible.
Storm vs Raiders was next. So Storm ground out a sort of fairly gritty win down in Melbourne here. Xavier Coates is a hamstring strain. That's looking moderate grade, Brian. So he is in significant doubt game 3, if at all. And then Jack Howarth with a glute strain, and Ryan Papenhuyzen sadly was a pre-game rule out with a heel injury that they couldn't get right for this game. So a few things stacking up again this year for Ryan Papenhuyzen, unfortunately.
Mate, I can't. That is, and people are going to say, injury prone and all this kind of stuff. Like that injury is just such a, and I know I get a bit of a rap for being sympathetic to these kind of players, but to land on your heel and get a bruised heel, for those people out there, and I've had so many comments on my things or DMs being like, oh, bruised heel, who misses time with that? Cleese Haas just missed, a couple of games with it, with a bruised heel, because it sucks. Like, it's in a horrible spot for a footy player. Like, to have bruising on your heel, feels like you're walking on a stone. That's just you're gonna be shithouse at your job, especially as a fullback who needs to run around a lot. So, yeah, it's not unprecedented. Apparently, Bellamy was saying in the post-match presser that they tried some injections, so probably some cortisone, some anti-inflammatory injections, painkiller injections, those kind of things into it, has not helped. So he's not in a good way at this point in time. Still, he wasn't up in the box from what I could see. So whether they're trying to keep him off it, keep his feet up, whether he was at home, I'm not sure if he was at the game or not. But yeah, so he's no guarantee for next week. It is still relatively a minor thing 99 times out of 100 in that it's just a bruised heel, but unfortunately where it is, every time you put your foot down, you're aggravating the bruise. So, I think next week or the week after is the bye, isn't it? So, look,
they've been on round to 19, yeah.
Oh, mate, I wouldn't be surprised if they just go, screw it. We've got they're top of the table. They've got far longer. I mean, they've just missed, they miss Xavier Coates, but they get Meaney back, hopefully. I wouldn't be surprised if they just leave it till after the bye and let him have a couple of weeks to settle down, as much as that is an absolute killer for any people who brought
They
him
do have
in.
the West Tigers next week as well, Ryan. So they've got West Tigers then bye. So people can read between the lines there of what I'm insinuating about the status of Ryan Papenhuyzen, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's I didn't realize, I didn't put two and two together about the bye, and now the Tigers as well.
Yeah.
So I'm growing more and more confident that Paps is going to miss next week. Jack Howarth, quickly, glute strain. It was a weird mechanism. I've actually I haven't gone back and recorded that one, but I saw it live at the time. And he kind of, as I think it was as he was scoring that try, his knee dug into the turf and he kind of got twisted around his hip. It was a really strange one because I saw him getting the test and I was like, oh, am I going to have to go and kind of do some analysis on this? Just watching on the TV, I've got to jump over to my computer just to let you in behind the curtain. But he stayed on momentarily, I think, and then came off. But they said, oh, look, he's he's cleared. He's a chance to come back on if need be. So I thought, oh, maybe he's just copped a cork or, hip pointer or something like that. But yeah, it'd be an interesting one. I'll have to go back and record it and slow it down and see what I can find, because that at the end of the day, that's the stuff that I actually enjoy the most about NRL Physio, is looking at that kind of thing. Xavier Coates with the hamstring strain, that was a really, really interesting one in that the Storm revealed that it's his third hamstring strain of the season on that right side. So he's had the one or the two that we know about, so the one from this round and one from earlier in the season, two right hamstring strains, but he also had one in the preseason as well. Look, I think more than anything, I'm just shocked that they played him then, coming off Origin. We'll talk about, our resting policy in one of the questions regarding the Broncos, but yeah, just surprising. I think that's every year now. So I think the last 3 years, I should say, every year we've had, because we had Reuben Cotter. He did his hammy in the warm-up for the Cows, coming back off, I think it was almost like his debut game or debut series. And he, played 80 minutes and then came back. So he did his hammy. And then we had Nathan Cleary as well. Nathan Cleary did his hammy coming back off Origin too. So that's a big name player. I mean, all players who play Origin are relatively big names, but that's 3 years in a row we've had a significant hamstring strain off guys backing up. So yeah, it doesn't, paint a great picture, unfortunately, for Coates. He's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks is what the Storm have announced. They said it was a low grade hamstring tear. I think that's throwing people with the low grade, but then 6 to 8 weeks. A couple of components here. Number one, it's his third. So as we spoke about before, scar tissue on top of scar tissue, neural changes, strength changes, all these kind of things are going on in there. It also can be to the tendon. And if you've listened to any part of this show in the past, you know that any damage to a tendon as opposed to a muscle requires longer recovery because there's reduced blood flow, heaps of force going through tendons. But the other component, I think, is kind of the wording that they've put on it, low grade, but then tear. I would say that is indicative of a grade 2 for me, because very rarely do you hear like a grade 1 muscle strain be described as a tear, because it's only, an irritation of the fibers, effectively some micro tearing. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a partial tear there, because that would usually be 4 to 6 weeks, but then extended out to 6 to 8 because of his history, and because he's a winger who relies on his speed so heavily, as we've spoken about in the past. The thing I want to throw to you, James, very quickly, Xavier Coates out of Origin 3. It's confirmed. What are you doing in the Queensland backline?
It's probably just Selwyn straight in, isn't it? It's just a straight swap. Probably not too complicated there. I think that's a really hot take. I'm very disappointed, Brian, you didn't mention hamstring asymmetry there, just to touch on the bucket of money that the NFL gave out to some university last year for.
They'd have to pay me $4
everyone...
million to mention that.
That's true. Yeah. So look, I was disappointed you didn't hit on that key point there, but I think the one thing that really stood out from just the footage of Xavier Coates with him getting helped off the field is a lot of those moderate to high grade injuries do result in players getting assistance from the field there, where some of those more minor ones, they can get themselves off without really too much noticeable, I guess, like antalgic pattern. So like sort of pain inhibited pattern there. I think like, Nathan Cleary sort of walks up fairly unencumbered, but then Maika Sivo, not Maika Sivo, who was Michaeli Ravalaval last year got sniped, and remember he had to get helped off with, his was like a grade 2 to 3. His was fairly high grade, and seeing Xavier Coates getting helped off up the tunnel was certainly prognostically not what you want to see with someone dealing with a hamstring, and in his case a repeat hamstring. So hopefully for our case, Selwyn can get through the next week injury free, and we don't have too many disruptions to the backline.
Origin Dane,
I would have said Dane.
Origin Dane. We've got it. We're fine.
Well, I don't know if you saw Origin Dane just get a bath by Mitchell Moses times2 on the weekend, Brian. So that would terrify me with him coming up against someone in the outside backs. Although Moses does have wheels, no question about it. But boy, oh boy, he would have been squeaky clean after getting bathed by Moses those 2 times
But mate,
on those long range tries.
You have to consider there that Moses is only beating Newcastle Knights Dane Gagai. He's not beating
This is a point.
Dane
Now
Gagai.
that's right. He's not Origin Dane. He's only Newcastle Dane. That's right. He's half the player. So you're right. If you put him in a maroon jersey, that would never have happened. So that would be the only contender I would see. But again, I think Selwyn's got the inside running there. And he wasn't too bad for the Broncos the other night. I didn't think he looked okay.
Yeah.
All right. So third last game, sorry, was Dragons v Dolphins. Jeremy Marshall-King with a foot injury here. I'm really crossing my fingers for this one. He's in my 9 position for SuperCoach, that it's not a serious injury. They've got the bye next week, I think, the Finns, don't they? So I hope we get some detail about that. And then also from the Dragons, Matt Finney with an AC joint injury. Jeremy Marshall-King is a fantasy relevant one here, though, Brian. Do you want to start off here with what you suspect or what you initially think?
Yeah, mate, I don't know about you, but my position, and I mean, this is more for me, I don't own him in SuperCoach, but obviously as a Finns diehard, I think I'm really worried. I think JMK's got the way I'd put it, he's got to win the lotto to avoid anything major here. The mechanism was horrible. Like you saw that foot get trapped. It got twisted. It got loaded. That is just not a good mechanism of injury for a foot, for a midfoot, for a metatarsal. Like I'm worried about fracture here. I'm worried about Liz Frank ligament injury. There's a lot that I'm worried about, and all of those things require extended periods on the sideline. So, I mean, best case scenario, he could get away with like a minor foot sprain, one of the little ligaments in that midfoot, in around the base of the foot there. Like I'm crossing my fingers and toes and really hoping, because I think the Finns are in all sorts if they lose JMK. He's probably the one guy in our team left now, like him and, Hammer, but, you drop from Hammer to Trey Fuller and it's not huge or not as big as JMK to, even Maxi Plath, who I love Maxi Plath, but he's just he's a worker. He's not a creator, and the Finns need help with creation at the moment. So I'm really concerned about that. Matt Finney with the AC joint, I think it's probably going to be moderate to high grade. That's usually 2 to 4 weeks. I've just recorded that video for that, so I'll put that up tomorrow. But yeah, mate, I mean, even as an owner, surely you're pretty nervous about JMK.
Very nervous. I didn't like the mechanism on the video there. Even my head went to best case scenario. Even if it's like a high ankle sprainy type thing, it didn't look like that. They weren't really assessing that on the field. It looked like more midfoot there. So it looks like extended period of time to me. So I'm going to have to factor that into my very limited trades that I have left of the season, Brien, if I want to roll 2 9s or whether I just roll with Coruscant and just, if it gets to it, it gets to it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm just going to have to suss out what the rest of my team's at and make a decision about that one. Panthers vs Cowboys, no concerns out of this one, Brien. We're going to go to the last game of the round because big name here, I think he's fairly highly owned, is Joey Manu with what sounded like in the presser from Trent Robinson was a hand fracture. This is probably looking like an extended period of time out. Joey shed a heap of cash as well. So moving him on is going to be a little bit tricky to find, especially if you don't have cash, find a sideways option or an upgrade option, isn't it?
Yeah, mate, this is an interesting one. We were sort of talking off air before we came on the show. Like hand fracture, you're looking at least 3 to 4 week return to play. So if you can get like a metacarpal, which is kind of like the bones, I guess, in the palm of your hand, if you can get one of those, like we had Kurt Mann recently, only missed 2 games and came back after one of those. The surgery for those is really good. Joey Manu was apparently heading straight to the hospital after the game. The interesting part about this that we were talking about is I found it really strange that he had to be like stabilized off the field. Not only stabilized, but they kind of like were covering it. It looked like they were covering it with the towel. So I don't know whether they're like the bone was so broken, so badly broken and deformed that it just looked really horrible. Because usually you're going to throw a towel over something like that if it's so. Like I think the one I can actually remember, and this is going right back, James. No one else listening, unless there's some Leos guys who are listening, will know this from our college days. But remember when Hocko broke his forearm in, I think it was first year rugby, and it was like at right angles all over the place. And that was when they threw the towel over the arm because they don't want to distress. They don't want to distress the athlete and kind of just want to, I guess, get it out of sight. So I was like, are they really throwing a towel over the hand here? Is it that badly broken? Or maybe they were, I just found that interesting. I'm kind of sitting on probably 4 to 6 weeks for me for Manu. I think 4 weeks is probably you'd be hoping best case, but those hand fractures can extend out to 6 to 8. The way I put it on socials is like if it's in an ideal spot or a less than ideal spot. So, an ideal spot, there are some bones in the hand with really poor blood supply. If it's one of those in a really tricky spot, harder to repair surgically, it can be 6 to 8 weeks. But if it's in a good spot, 3 to 4 weeks. So yeah, mate, are you sort of similar with that? I guess that weirdness about the stabilizing it off field and then trying to cover it, I guess, was the interesting part of that injury.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the only other thing I thought was it an open fracture where it actually pierced through the skin and there was bone showing? But again, same sort of situation, same sort of conundrum. I suppose you're still looking at a fairly extended period of time out for Joey Manu. And again, at his price point that he's going to be, it's going to be around 600. That's going to be a tricky one to move on if you don't have a lot of cash gen in your side, or like us, you don't have a lot of trades left either. So there's a few questions to be answered there on that front for Joey Manu rosters for SuperCoach. All right, Brien, that's round 17 wrapped up. We're going to go straight into the Patreon questions now. So patreon.com/NRL Physio is where you got to go to get these questions answered. We're going to rip straight in, Brien. We've got a lot to get through tonight. So the first one is about Tom Trbojevic. Looks like he's going to get named at centre. How long do you reckon he's going to stay at centre for?
Mate, I got asked this in the Patreon live chat or group chat today, and the way I put it is put a calendar up on the wall and throw a dart, and you'd have more chance getting it right than someone trying to guess what Anthony Seibold is going to do. I know you're a big lover of Seibold, so this I'm preaching to the choir here, but yeah, I just don't. I don't trust Seibold to do anything that you would think. Like me personally, I've sort of said with where Turbo has gone, you've got some capable replacements in your likes of Cooler and Garrick. I would try it for the rest of the season and see how it goes, and then use the off season to kind of really try and build him back up again and get him into it. But yeah, I just couldn't guess. I couldn't guess really at this point in time because it's too difficult. I think a few people have sort of said, oh, he's defending in the front line. He's going to be, more susceptible to, pec injuries or whatever. But the thing I do want to say just very quickly is that he is so highly susceptible to hamstring injuries moving forward. We all know that. All the other stuff, he's not all that susceptible to. Like all of those kind of like the pec tears and the shoulder injuries and stuff, they're just fluke kind of occurrences. I've never seen a pec tear re-rupture, after going through the rehab process. So I'm not really worried about his pecs. So yeah, it's just that it's the hammies for me. The hammies are the massive concern. You will know how much James and I have loved Turbo, spoken so highly about him. But yeah, I've definitely hit a point where I am a bit concerned about it. But yeah, James, I mean, can you try and play reading Seabold's mind here and tell me how long Tommy Turbo is going to be at centre for?
Well, Brian, I'm not Harvard educated in a rugby league sense around NRL coaching, so I find it difficult to comment on this. Although I will say, look, I suppose for Manly, like let's just quickly just drag their draw up and just see what we're looking like there. Because I know Manly's got a fairly cushy draw, and they're only 1 point outside the 8, so things don't look too bad for Manly moving forward. So whether I guess they just get into the groove of things. So they bite in round 17. They've got the Cowboys, Knights, Titans, Roosters, Raiders, Warriors, Tigers, Bulldogs, Sharks. So not the worst run on the way home there. My thinking is maybe you take Tom into fullback for round 26, round 27. You give him the Bulldogs, give him the Sharks, and then you're launching into the finals. I think that gives Manly the best chance to make a run and make a deep run. So I reckon he might get an extended run at centre, because if Kohler can cover it, if Garrett can cover it, I think you try to get these wins on the board. They got a round 22 bye as well, so maybe they even go through to round 23 before returning him at fullback. But I think if they can start getting some W's and start accumulating points, like Manly are well and truly in the race for the 8. And then look at round 26, round 27 with the Bulldogs and the Sharks, probably two of the tougher matchups they've got there for the next few weeks. I reckon that's the way that I would sort of shape things up there. And that's based off nothing apart from just how I think and how I feel. And I don't have a Harvard degree for that, Brian. So probably just put that opinion in the bin is all I'd say. What do you reckon? Is there any time frame things there that sort of stand out? I suppose the round 22 bye might be one. Round 26 might be one. They're very speculative though. Like we don't really have anything hard and fast, do we?
Yeah, no. Look, we've just spoken about it, but I still have landed on just throw a dart at the calendar, see where it lands.
Sounds like a better shout than what I just did, Brian. So let's go with that. So question number 2 for Patreon, Brian, is about Jaman Hopgood. So he's having back surgery. I don't know the details around that. Would there be any long-term concerns with this type of procedure for him career-wise, do you think?
Yeah, so microdiscectomy, James, which I was a bit surprised at, to be honest. So that's where he's got a bulging disc. That's where the disc bulges out of the back of your spine and pinches on the nerves as they run out of your spine, and that can. So apparently he's been dealing with sciatic pain. So anybody out there listening, I'm sure you either have experienced it yourself or have somebody you know who's spoken about sciatic pain. So it's kind of back pain into glute pain into lower leg pain, all that kind of nervy, really nasty pain. Apparently Hopgood's been dealing with sciatic pain on and off for quite some time. So lovely that we don't hear about this as, as fans of the game or, whatever. But aggravated in Origin 1. So yeah, for those people out there, unfortunately, as good a story as it would be, Liam Martin did not cause this injury. It was something that Hopgood has been dealing with for a while. So they go in and they shave away. So they literally shave away the bulging part of the disc. So they remove that bulging part to try and give the nerves a bit of space to breathe. James, this is an interesting one in the two settings that we, I guess, work in that I know in your setting, it would be avoid surgery at all costs for these kind of things. I think a lot of the time, for me, it is very similar, I think. But I probably see a few more surgical cases maybe around this, especially on a micro discectomy kind of range. But I think it's interesting in that for a lot of my patients, I sit there and I talk to them about, like, I use the age old, your discs, say your shock absorbers. If you take away shock absorption, while it might help you in the short term, in the long term, you've taken away some of that shock absorption. So it can, cause problems down the track. And so we're always kind of having those discussions, because I do see mixed results with these kind of micro discectomies. I do see some people respond really well and others respond poorly. It's interesting, but I went back today because that's my experience, and that's dealing with athletes. It's dealing with everyday people. I went back today and had a look at the people I've reported on in the NRL over time who've had micro discectomies. They've all responded really well. There isn't a player who's, reported, ongoing significant back issues. There was a couple of guys who had, I think it was Jed Cartwright, continued to have some like back spasms and things like that. But all of them continued to play in the NRL. So it wasn't like their careers were ended by it or anything like that. So I think to answer the question, usually I would say, yeah, there are some long-term concerns, because removing some of that disc while in the short term, can be really helpful. Long term, sometimes there are some concerns, but in the NRL so far, if history is anything to tell us, they actually respond quite well. So, James, I think from your perspective, working in hospital and working in chronic pain, you would probably see even the worse end of this than me. So I'd love to get your take.
I do get a fairly loaded population group, Brian. So that's probably worth saying straight off the bat, is that in terms of the bell curve, the people that don't do well are the ones that normally end up my way. So I guess I do hear the people that have, certain back surgeries or neck surgeries or any spinal interventions. Sometimes they're repeated, sometimes for reasons that are not super clear, and I guess the sequelae after that is never something that goes all that well. So I think, it really depends on the person, their presentation, Brian, as to whether the surgery is going to be a good thing or not a good thing, isn't it? I think we see I see a percentage of people that probably don't have the same type of psychic symptoms that Jaman was reported as having. So I don't see some people as having the same neurological symptoms, the radiating symptoms, those type of things. So some people get these type of procedures for localized back pain, and they're probably the people that do the worst out of all of them. So in his situation, it's not purely just for back pain, it's for the radiating symptoms, it's leg pain, it's psychotic type symptoms, it's where there's neurological fallout. That's where these things are indicated, and that's where with a microdiscectomy, you're obviously not fusing things and doing huge decompression around it as well. That's obviously prognostically good as well. It's a bit, I guess, it's still invasive, but it's as least invasive as it possibly can be around some fairly delicate structures. So I think in his situation, I wouldn't be concerned long term. I think between now and the start of next season, if they're going to wrap him up in cotton wool before then, the Eels are running last. I wouldn't have any concerns rostering him from a SuperCoach point of view, and he's probably going to be someone who wears maroon for us moving forward, I would assume as well, Brian. I thought he had a reasonable game in game one, and obviously missed game two, but I think he'll be part of that setup moving forward. Question 3 is about Kalen Ponga. Some chat around him coming back round 19 or round 20. If that was the case, Brian, would you trade him in straight away coming off the Liz Frank surgery?
Mate, let's pretend we're in a world where I don't have 8 trades left. So let's get that off the bat. If I had trades and he was named in round 19, I would be bringing him in 1000%, purely because I think bye rounds are big moving rounds. And to have someone like Kalen in, I'm not sure who they're playing in round 19. But yeah, look, I'm saying that there are definitely performance implications coming back off Liz Frank injuries. We usually see a downturn in some performance factors. This is mainly in NFL. There hasn't been too many studies done in NRL, but in NFL, they found that the measurables decreased around 20% for the first season back after a Liz Frank injury. So that's an interesting thing. We did see AJ Brimson come back as a pardon me, a comparable player, came back after suffering it in that Origin end of season one. He came back the next season and was pretty quiet to kick off the season. So yeah, there are some concerns there with the Liz Frank injury, but I just think if he's named, he's just such a huge point of difference for that short week. I wouldn't have any qualms buying him if I had the cash and the money. The cash and the trades. What about you?
Do you know if it was a right or left foot injury, Brian? I actually can't remember because my thinking would be if he's goal kicking, he's in. If he's not goal kicking, he's not. That would be my only caveat. And I seem to remember it was his right foot. So that would make me more inclined to bring him in, but I just can't remember that. I've obviously got a 50-50 shot if I'm just a moron either way about this, but I have a faint suspicion it was his right foot that was the one that had surgery. And then in that case, if it's not going to impact on him goal kicking, then I would be more inclined to bring Kalen in. They get Manly in round 19. Obviously, Manly will be missing a few for Origin. Then they go into the Broncos. Then they go to the bye. And then they go Penrith, West Tigers, Sharks, Bunnies, Titans, Dolphins. Geez, it's a good run home. So I think if you could get him in, I would get him in ASAP. I think the other thing is if the one this week just gone, if they beat the Raiders, they may well give him a little bit longer just with Fletcher Sharp doing a pretty good job there and with their outside backs doing the business. So I think the more the Knights win, the less inclined they'll be to bring him in there because I guess when you look at, again, the ladder, it's so congested and so close there with the Knights. They're only one win outside of the 8. So if they can just be thereabouts and then toward like the end of the year when they're rolling into like West Tigers, even the Sharks, they'd probably fancy themselves against later in the year, Bunnies, Titans, Finns. Not too bad a run home. They just get Penrith around 22, which would be a tricky one, but it's not too bad a run home. And remember last year they went 7 straight before the finals, I think, didn't they? They got real hot towards the end of the year off the back of Kalen playing lights out. But I think his ceiling in Supercoach is just unrivaled, especially this year. There hasn't been too many people in that stratosphere, so I would be inclined to bring him in as well and just roll with it as best as you can because I think he presents a very good option. I can't remember where he's priced at off the top of my head, but I think you just got to blow up your roster and get him in if you can, would be my sort of thinking. Same question about Nathan Cleary in round 20. Would you do the same for Nathan Cleary is the next Patreon question?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say I just went and looked it up while you were laying down some good info there. It was the right foot for Ponga.
Okay.
So, yeah, so Cleary in round 20. Coming back off the hamstring, I would usually be a big, avoid for the first 2 weeks because of the re-injury risk. From what I've been told, Cleary, they are taking their time with him. They are really, really going slow, understandably. So that gives me more confidence on that re-injury risk that they're going above and beyond. They don't really need to rush him. So whenever he is named, I feel a bit more confident about that. Like, I just feel like with the limited weeks left, every week that you don't have someone like Cleary in your team could really cost you. So yeah, I'd be leaning towards if he's named. In my head, I've only got like 8 trades left. 2 of those trades are put away. I'm trying to keep 4 for just emergencies, which is not many, I know. But this is how I do it every year. Same with you, James, I know. But I'm putting 2 of those aside for Cleary whenever he's like the first week he's named, just because I don't think there's many rounds left. So I need him as soon as he's there. What about you, mate?
Yeah, his draw from round 20 is red hot. Like they go Finns, Dragons, Knights, Eels. Storm's a tough one, but they are at home for that. Raiders, Bunnies, Titans. Like, I mean, he could score 200 against the Gold Coast when they have their Bali end of season trip booked for round 27. Like, that could be an absolute blood. Or he could get rested. I guess that's the only caveat there is if the Panthers are flying and they're well ahead and the Titans are on Mad Monday early, then he might get rested from that one. That might be the only sort of caveat there. I guess the tricky thing I've got in my team, I've got Nico and also Sam Walker. Sam Walker's got a pretty good draw. He's been scoring fairly consistently. But I could move straight sideways across because I think Cleary's going to shed a bit of coin to start with. I think his break even's is it 140 or thereabouts, I think. So there could be an argument to wait maybe 1 or 2 weeks for him to bottom out and then bring in. But you may well lose a 100-point week and a 100-point week, even though he drops a bit of cash. So it's that balance of cash versus the points, I suppose, Brian, isn't it? So my thinking would be, in my situation, I'll probably wait a week just to see if he can just shed, maybe 40 or 50, depending on where Seb Walker's at. That might be a straight across type scenario. But I think his ceiling again is so high. Him and Ponga are kind of the 2 that you sort of need to have in your team. that would be my takeaway on things there, I think, as well. But geez, their draw is not that bad towards the end of the year either. So he's someone that's shaping up as a must-have whenever he comes back after the Origin period. What about the Broncos in terms of when they rested their players this week, Brian? This is the next question. So they obviously rested Payne Haas, Carrigan, and Reece Walsh on the trip over to New Zealand. Do you think they were right to rest those boys coming off the back of Origin there? I didn't have too many problems with Payne Haas or Carrigan, but Reece Walsh, I was a little bit dubious about, given that he hasn't had a whole lot of footy recently, unless he was nursing injury from a contact mechanism. What do you reckon about them and their decisions there?
Yeah, mate, I lended some quotes to an article coming out tomorrow, which is apparently a lot stronger worded than I initially intended the quotes to be, sort of around, Kevy did the right thing and that kind of stuff. I just think that there is absolutely justification, quite easy justification to resting guys backing up off Origin, like we've seen with Xavier Coates, what the price you can pay for these kind of guys, and particularly around Payne Haas. I think that is just the easiest rest of all time because he put up 190 meters the other night, played the absolute house down. He's been dealing with an ongoing knee issue for much of this season that he had surgery on, like 2 games in 4 or 5 days. Just, I think from memory, did he back up after the first one and the first game and first Origin game and wasn't great? I've got that in my head. That could be wrong, but
Can't remember. Sorry.
I just think that was an easy one. I think Carrigan is another one, probably due, a bit of a breather. He's been putting up huge minutes for the Bronx week in, week out, and then, has played really like bigger minutes for the Maroons as well. Yeah, Walsh is the one I was surprised. I was surprised they rested him. Whether there was anything to the hit pointer that we talked about before, but yeah, hasn't played a lot of footy lately. Yes, there was an international flight which I brought up in my quotes coming out tomorrow, just about, like you've got the international flight there. Walsh was dealing with a recurring MCL injury about 6-8 weeks ago. So, but I don't think that's been a concern for him in recent times. But I just think overall, I think globally, like you've seen how the Broncos have struggled without Adam Reynolds for 12 weeks, right? Like if they lose, and every time you go out, there's a risk of injury, don't get me wrong, but yeah, if they lose like a Reece Walsh for 6 to 8 weeks, that is just huge. So I do understand it from that perspective, but I just think there's probably enough there that Walsh hasn't played much lately that I definitely was surprised that he didn't, that he was rested. And then the one thing I want to say is that I think I posted something. It was one of them commented on my thing about the Cowboys and the Bronx being rested. And they said, back in the day, guys used to play midweek comp on Wednesday nights and then go to work and then play on the weekend. And these guys are soft. And I just wanted to say really quickly, like players want to play. So if you gave those 3 players the choice, all 3 of those players I can almost guarantee you all 3 of them would play. This isn't a case of players have gone soft. This is a case of clubs have gotten smart. Clubs use sports science. They use all of these things to predict injury risk. They try and minimize that as much as they possibly can. This is the clubs telling them to rest. Like their players want to play. They always want to play to their own detriment at times. So yeah, it's not a player's gone soft. It is absolutely the clubs are trying to be smarter about it.
It is tricky as well, Brian, because you look at the ladder, there's such a logjam. Like between the Bulldogs at 5th and the Raiders in 12th, there's only 2 points separating those teams there. So it's so tight. If you just get a little bit hot towards the end of the year, you can make a bit of a run. And I think coaches, especially I guess if you're Kevy, and if you get all your players back and you're trying to count down the weeks until Adam Reynolds comes good, maybe that's his thinking, is that I can just keep the cattle as healthy as I can, that come this Origin period after round 19, hopefully we can start stringing them together and we can get hot towards the end of the year and try and make a run from deep on the ladder. It's been a pretty tough year for the Broncos. Like I think you'd understand if they wanted to sort of write the year off almost with Adam Reynolds missing for so much of it, but I think there's still enough talent there that they should make a bit of noise because on their day they're a good team. All right, Brian, we've got a couple more questions from Patreon here. What about Ruben Garrick? So he was ruled out through HIA protocols a couple of weeks ago. Is there talk of him missing longer?
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of this around because of the turbo coming back at center. My gut feeling at the moment is that it's Hopewadi owners kind of stirring up a bit of shit to be like, because I haven't heard it from anywhere that that he is dealing with ongoing concussion symptoms. Look, it is his second concussion of the year, and he had one last year as well. So it's his third one in the last 2 years. As we know, concussions are very unpredictable. I think the question said, do we have a rough idea on time Garrett could miss if he's still dealing with it? Look, we haven't seen anyone miss more than kind of 4 to 6 weeks, even with those significant concussion symptoms. But yeah, I just think it's just way too early to say. And there's way too much of this, like the DMs that I'm getting are like, oh, I've heard from a good source, and I'm always really hesitant when I get, oh, that's a good one. I had someone in my DMs this week from a really solid source that Nathan Cleary, I actually had a couple who tore his quad off the bone in his hamstring rehab and was going to miss the rest of the season. 2 separate people told me that. So if that comes true, good on them. But I think it was almost like that I got sent that, and then the next day there was photos of Cleary at Panthers training on their Instagram. So yeah, I think all this stuff to Ben, the question asker here, is just, yeah, I think we have to take that stuff with a grain of salt because it's just all over the shop.
I guess Hopewadi's probably the one to make way there because they cannot drop Tommy Talau, Brian. Surely Manly can't drop Tommy Talau. He's been their best back, hasn't he? Would you agree? The Supercoach breakout of this season?
I tried to stir you on Twitter.
I know. I didn't buy it. I was fuming,
so many people responded to me like, seriously? They were like, no way, like Tommy Talau.
Yeah,
I'm like,
good.
No, I know Tommy Talau.
People get it. People get it. He's been balling, mate. Get this garbage off Twitter. Just doxing me on Twitter. Right, next question, Brian, is about the Broncos. So up the Bronx first and foremost. But is there any update on how Adam Reynolds is tracking through his rehab from his bicep rupture and surgery? Do we know return date? And then I guess on his return, what do we know about re-injury risk and expectations of his performance on return?
Yeah, re-injury risk very low for a bicep rupture. Once again, I've never seen a repeat bicep rupture in the NRL after it's been repaired. So yeah, re-injury risk minuscule. In terms of his performance, first couple of games back, look, as a halfback, he's not using his bicep. Like he's not somebody who you rely on to make 50 tackles a game, to wrestle guys. Like his performance isn't based on that. So you could argue maybe the accuracy of his passes, it might take him a little bit of time to kind of get that feel back. But I just don't think it's going to be noticeable at all. Return date, I believe the last update I heard was around 22 to 23 is what he was aiming, but a sneaky chance for around 21 potentially. So somewhere in that kind of range, I think plant your flag at around 22. And if it's a week later or a week earlier, somewhere around there.
Very good. Last question was about Hyman Maluki this week. He passed his HIA and it wasn't deemed category 1 from what I can gather. But I guess the question is, it looked like he showed a very clear fencing response where he didn't break his fall. And the patron said here, I thought that was indicative of an immediate category 1 HIA. So I guess, did you see the footage of this, Brian? And what was your take on what you saw via video there for Hyman Maluki?
Yeah, mate, I didn't see it live. I reviewed it after I got this question. And yeah, I share the surprise of this question asker because I wouldn't say, I don't know whether it was definitely a fencing response, but he certainly looked out of it, vacant, blank stare. It almost looked like his eyes rolled back a little bit. At immediately afterwards, he definitely showed no bracing of his fall to the ground. It all happened really quickly though. And then he even looked a little bit dusty, kind of getting up from the ground to kind of go off the field. So yeah, the hardest thing in my answer to all of these questions, and we've spoken about why this current system sucks a little bit in that it's just so subjective. I can sit there and make a justification why each thing was a certain thing. Like, I can say, yep, I thought his eyes rolled back in his head, and I can say that, I thought he showed no, bracing with his fall to the ground. But then somebody else who's sitting next to me can have a totally different opinion. And yeah, it's just so subjective. That's why we just need these objective markers, these blood tests, these saliva tests, these eye tests to come out so that we can have this objective thing of yes, he did or he didn't suffer a concussion, or his brain isn't at a point where he can go back on the field. Because the answer to the question is, how did he pass his HIA? Because an independent doctor and a club doctor deemed that he didn't show any clear signs of concussion. That's the answer to every single one. So in the opinion of two people, he didn't show any signs of concussion. It's that simple. Which, in their opinion, it's all opinion based. It's obviously opinion based on assessment and reviewing video footage and those kind of things. But we just need objective stuff to come in.
Couldn't agree more. I think when those objective things become part and parcel of things, I haven't heard any sort of real good research coming out, and people in that space. I know one person who's sports med, and he's sort of fairly skeptical that there'll be something objective there anytime soon. So hopefully, for all intents and purposes, we find that sooner rather than later. Hey.
Yeah, 100%, mate. All right, I definitely don't mind throwing to you this week in SuperCoach Corner. You absolutely rock and rolled me last week, but I've flipped the tables this week. Hit me with your expert captaincy pick for this week, and your score and your trade options.
Yeah, thanks for the condescending intro there, Brien. So for everyone listening at home here, not a great week for myself. So funnily, last week I scored 200 points more with 4 less players. So this week, only 962. I did the genius move akin to an Anthony Seabold coaching masterstroke of captaining Joey Manu. I VC'd Nico, which obviously didn't get me a huge amount of points. So I had the choice of Manu or Dom Young. And I don't know why I didn't go Dom Young, Brien, because he served me so well earlier in the year when I skipped him to 160, and that was one of the great all-time weeks that I had. But I just thought Joey Manu was due for a try. I saw Adam Dewey and Naden in the centres. He hadn't scored a try in 3 weeks. And I thought, maybe it's the week for Joey Manu here. Anyway, he decided to have his hand broken this week, which cost me quite a lot of points. The 2 trades I made. So I traded KPP to Bryce Cartwright. So that worked out really quite nicely. And I really like Cardi rest of the season here, Brien. I just want to pump this up for a bit because on my deep dive I did later in the week, I was looking at options, and Bryce Cartwright scored very poorly early in the year when he was nursing a rib injury, missed 4 weeks, lower on minutes, no attacking stats. And he's come back since I think it was round 14 or 15, since he got about 4 weeks off for his broken ribs. And he's been averaging very, very, very well. The Eels are going to be leaking points, and Bryce Cartwright, if people don't know this by now, loves an offload, loves that, and they need to lean on him to create points. So I think he's nearly, I dare say, must have. I know that's a spicy as take, but he covers round 19. The Eels are going to be chasing points week in and week out. He's going to be playing 80 minutes. There's not competition for spots there. Early in the year, there was a little bit of in and out, and he was nursing a rib. So I think if people look at his earlier scores and go, oh, Cardi scored crap earlier in the year, it's because he was injured and he missed some weeks. For that rib, I think it was rib fracture, rib cartilage at least. So he missed 4 weeks, and he's come back and he's been very, very good. That's why I brought him in. And this week just gone, he was exceptional. So everyone watched that game closely, but I thought he was very, very good. He just finds a way to create things, loves an offload. So I think Bryce Carter has a really good shout for second row. And the other trade I did was Nick Meaney to Sharp via fullback. So I just generated a bit of cash there for my team moving forward. So in terms of plans, Brian, I need to get the team back on track. I need to shape everyone up again and give them a stern talking to. So one of my big plans is to get Ruben Garrick in round 19 because he's got a very high break even. So hopefully this week he is named and he sheds a lot of coin. Then I can bring him in next week at a more, I guess, affordable price. The ones I want to move out this week is Dallin Watini-Lesniak. He's been my worst trade-in of the season by a mile. I think I've only traded him for 3 or 4 games. That's just been an absolute unmitigated disaster for me. So that was just one of the big coaching bed shits. In terms of targets at centre wing, it's probably Mulatalo, Marzu, or Cooler at centre wing. In second row forward, I think you've got to look at Hamali Olakawatu at price and also Holland Lukey. I think getting them in now, even though, especially Olakawatu is going to have, miss a few games with bye and miss a few games with New South Wales call up. But my God, he's dirt cheap, Brien, and his ceiling is very, very, very good. I think you can make a good argument to bringing him in. The only other thing I need to do, pending what the outcome is with Jeremy Marshall-King, is I might need to look at options there, but that can wait a week because obviously the Dolphins have the bye. So hopefully we get some solid info about Jeremy Marshall-King. And I guess the sort of hooking options, like you sort of got to look at the Roosters, don't you? I guess like the Cheese played 80, Connor Watson played 80. They both look reasonably good. The Roosters have got a good draw, but then also I think Blake Brayley was someone he mentioned last week, and I know you're going to talk on him in second as one of your trade-ins. I think they're all shaping up as reasonable buys, but it's probably a luxury pick for me. If I don't need them in my starting 17, I want to have Sam Walker each week as one of my reserves. I want to have a second fullback and then probably a couple in centre wing, depending on matchup. So it's probably not really necessary to have a second hooker. So I might just sort of sit on that one, even though it ties up a whole lot of cash. But if I don't need to, I don't need to. I might need to just nuff him out when the time comes later in the year, perhaps. So bit of a shame because Jeremy Marshall-King was shaping up as really good coverage through the buys, and he's obviously averaged very well through the year, and he's the centre point of that Dolphins attack. So that was a little bit of a shame from that point of view. So a few decisions to make, a couple of untimely things for my team there, but yeah, a bit of a sad face on myself today for captaining Joey Manu, Brien. So that was a real swing and a miss. How did you go this week? You obviously stacks better than me. You probably cleared me by did you clear me by 300 this week, or at least 200? Way more than me this week.
Mate, I will say, like, commiserations for the Manu pick, but epic call on Cardi. I'm a big Cardi guy. I think I picked Cardi in the first round of draft, like that year after, and he was absolutely shithouse, but I've just always got a soft spot for Cardi. I love some Bryce Cartwright. And
Join us in the party. Join us in the party, Brien.
Mate.
You know you want to.
Well, like, I'll be honest with you, I tossed him so hard this week, and if I didn't, so I'll talk about, I brought in Blake Brayley. If I didn't bring in Blake Brayley, I was going to bring in Cardi. Like, that's how it kind of fell, because I've got had Harry Grant and Jaden Brayley in the front, in the hooker, and then Grant got ruled out. And like, Jaden Brayley is just an absolute plotter at the moment. Like, I brought him in hopefully, like, thinking, yeah, the Knights are just going to play him 80 or, at least 60 moving forward. And that just has not eventuated. And I just couldn't. I was just so frustrated. I was like, I cannot start Jaden Brayley. I just got pumped last week, like, scored shit. And so I was like, screw it. I'll bring in Blake. I think he's got some upside. I think the Sharks got a pretty soft draw moving forward. So I didn't mind it. He scored 60 odd on the weekend and wasn't involved in too much attack. So I really like that sort of moving forward. But before Harry Grant got ruled out, Cardi was coming in for me. So that's, I don't know. And now I don't know whether I can do it, because I had a look today. I'm pretty well set for round 19. Round 20 is a real issue for me, because I've got a lot of Sharks and quite a few Eels as well. I think it's Sharks, Eels, and someone else who I've got some.
Is it Dragons as well? Off the top of my head?
I can't remember.
Yeah,
I've got a few out, and I'm going to struggle. So, I just don't know whether I can bring in another Eel. Also, I've got 8 trades. So, it's all luxury stuff at this point.
Yeah, Dragons is the other team, yeah.
Right, yep. So, I think, this week I brought in Blake Brayley and I brought in Mulatalo for Armstrong. I'm really loading up on the Sharks, hoping they can turn it around. So, my plans are, at the moment, Joey Manu to Greg Marzhew. I think Marzhew, I'm hoping Ponga's back sooner rather than later, but Sharp showed on the weekend that he can get the ball to Marzhew as well. They've got some good games coming up, as you said. Marshew's going to have a negative break even. I think it's perfect time to bring him in. And then the other one for me is Cooler. If he's named at fullback, I think I'm going to bring him in pretty much straight away. If it's not this week, it'll be next week. I'm eyeing off, like, if the easy decision for me would be if Meany's not named, if that calf kind of hangs around, I'll probably go Meany to Cooler. But the other one, hot take, like, and traditional SuperCoach people will hate me for doing this, but the other one I'm looking at is KL Ero to Cooler. I've got a lot of Sharks, number one, but number two, and I know he's due an attacking stat, like, it has to come at some point, but I think Cooler at fullback at 4, he's like 430 or 450k or something.
Yeah,
You just,
such a
if he's named at fullback, you just you just do it. Like, you don't think twice. You got Turbo in the centers, like, who's going to help him out as well. Yeah, I just think lock it in, because the other one I was looking at is Jermaine Asako. He's so cheap, but mate, like, Hammer's out until probably round 21. I don't see him backing up in round 20 after Origin. Like, a quick turnaround with that AC joint issue, potentially he does, but without Hammer till round 21, now no JMK. I mean, I'm pretty pessimistic at the best of times about my teams in any comp, but yeah, I'm very nervous that the Finns are going to go the way of last year at the back end of the year and lose quite a few games on the trot, especially if JMK's out. If Flegler doesn't come back, it's not looking good there. So I just don't love the Asako play at the moment until the Finns show a little bit more. The other one, of course, is our boy TPJ, but mate, he hasn't been doing much. Like, he's only scored like mid-30s a couple of times. So I had him locked and loaded. If you listen to this podcast a couple of weeks ago, I was like, yeah, I'm going to bring him in. He's going to average, I thought he'd average at least 50 in that Finns pack, especially, the game just gone where had some injuries and he had to probably play bigger minutes in the middle and still only scored like 30 odd. Gives away a lot of penalties. But yeah, that's a bit sad on our boy TPJ. I thought he'd be better than he is.
Yeah, it's a bit unfortunate, isn't it? I still might bring him in if I'd sort of take Terrell May down, Brian, to be honest, just because I need a bit of a spark in my team. I need some enjoyment from a week in and week out point of view. But it's not looking overly promising, isn't it? I suppose that's the challenge. And yeah, I guess in the front row, like, I've sort of got I didn't, stupidly this week. I know we talked about it last week, but Max King, I didn't play him this week because I thought, well, Finu plays 80. Terrell May looks like a good start this week. So I didn't play Max King. He pumps out one of his best scores of the season, and his son's name's Hercules. What was I thinking?
What are you
What's wrong with me?
doing? If there was ever a
What's wrong with
time.
me? I know. I've had many bed shits this week. It's been a week of bed shits off the back of last week, and that's been story of my season, sadly, in SuperCoach, Brian. It's like every good week I have is followed up by one probably worse than the week before that claws me back into it. So I've got to get some consistency down. I've got to nail it down, unfortunately.
Yeah, mate, I didn't hang on to our boy Kiraz. I should have just held him and Maxi King all year because, yeah, the heart picks. Maxi King still, look, he's only averaging like mid-50, so he hasn't been as strong a buy of the year candidate. But, I mean, mate, he's got a son called Hercules, and he's pumping out 80 points when I needed him to, so fantastic. Guys, that's it for the week. If you like the pod, please give us a review or recommend to a friend. The reviews make a big difference just to kind of help get us out there so that our Sunday nights are getting into more people's ear holes. Want more info like this, patreon.com/NRL Physio. But James, hopefully no injuries to Queenslanders this week, and we can have a relatively full complement of players to pick from. Have a good week, mate. We'll I guess, celebrate as the NRLW Origin champions this week, and hopefully men's Origin champions to come in a couple of weeks' time.
Crossing my fingers, Brian. I am desperate to hear if Cam Smith is getting back in the squad, because part of my thinking is we don't have a father figure in our team at the moment. Billy's a good figure, but he's not Cam Smith. He's not dad. He's not dad of the state. I wonder if these two average performances for game 1 and game 2 is because we haven't had Queensland dad in the mix. I hope back in Queensland, Cam Smith has a bit of a time up his sleeve that he can, like, maybe neglect his son's footy team for a little bit and really invest into the Queensland Origin team for a must-win game in Suncorp, because we need Queensland dad to step up to the table here. And this is off the back of obviously seeing what the girls were able to do in the NRLW. And I will say, with Lauren Brown wearing the 9 for Queensland, immense feeling of safety there, because I would argue that she's almost like a Queensland mum. She was a gun, won game 2 for us, had an outstanding game 3. Lauren Brown was immense and epic. And just the person wearing 9 for Maroon, when they're going good, I feel good and I feel safe. Everything is good in the world. It keeps things sensible. I like it.
Mate, I completely agree with you. The thing I want to flip to you, which just quickly, I know people who've been here for this long just want to hear us keep talking. We've spoken about it off air. Has there been a downfall for Harry Grant? Like, he just, Origin-wise, Storm-wise, like, I just don't think he's as good as the hype was a couple of seasons ago.
I don't know what it is, Brian, but it just feels like every Origin series, everyone picks him for he's going to be player of the series. We're going to win man of the matches with him. Every time he comes on, the commentary box like has conniptions. They're like, Harry Grant's coming on. Oh my god! But I can't recall there being too many instances where I've looked back in recent times with Harry and gone far out. He's made a real difference to that team. I think he's been comprehensively outplayed by Ben Hunt. Wearing the 9 jersey of Queensland and playing that position, Ben Hunt's had far more moments in the last 2-3 years than Harry has, in my opinion. And, that's credit to Ben Hunt, but he's a guy that wears 7 for his club. So, he doesn't play that position week in, week out. I don't know if it's the way they play. I don't know if it's the structure. I don't know if it's the setup. But yeah, I think it's a fair question to make about Harry's performances in Maroon. I think he's not going to miss out on his spot, but I don't think there's been an impact there for quite some time. Hopefully that means he explodes in a couple of Wednesdays and he has the game of his life and we win the series and it's all hunky dory again. But yeah, I think we need Cam Smith in and around that group, Brian. I want Queensland dad in the mix. I want to feel a sense of safety again because I'm feeling apprehensive. My Queensland arrogance is waning a little bit. It was a tough loss in game 2.
Mate, I just wanted to talk Harry down for a bit just to give us even further underdog status. We're just drifting to further and further outsiders. You'll see the headlines of the papers will be Harry Grant out of form, barely making NRL, picked for Maroons. Just the plucky underdogs, mate. They're going to get it done.
That's
I
right.
love it. I love it. All right, guys. Up the mighty, Redcliffe Dolphins.